We have 2 more sessions before lunch. And also regarding this topic, Jade, who's the next speaker after our Daryl, will speak a lot about the creation of language models in the African context. A little while ago, I did a demo with one of our business schools on ChatGPT, and I took a spreadsheet, like a employee spreadsheet. Daryl, I'll stop now so you can get going. With like start date, salary, gender, etc. It was anonymized. And you do a copy and you paste it into ChatGPT and you ask for analysis. And it's actually quite fascinating what it comes up with. But then I asked it to explain it to a child, and it would say something like, there are too many boys and not enough girls in the company. It said that's a problem. But just on languages, which I found interesting, because I had a translation service open on the other screen, I asked it to analyze the data for me in Afrikaans, which was 100% grammatically correct. And then I used Translate to look at Zulu, Xhosa, etc. And it was fascinating. So I think there's a lot of progress being made in some of these large language models. Context is, of course, king, and I think that's where they might miss it. But it's really worth playing on ChatGPT in your native language and see how accurate it is. Daryl Marcus, the VP Sales Africa at LivePerson, you've got a fascinating topic. Listen to this. The Gen AI Parenting Guide. Raising a healthy, well-adjusted AI for customer engagement. And I'd like to hear, and you can do it in your talk if you want to, I'm sure you're going to cover it. Is AI currently a child, and what if it becomes a teenager? And it slams the door and tells you to go F yourself. That's a challenge. But in any case, give him a warm applause, and we look forward to your conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Thanks everyone for your time, and looking forward to the next 20 minutes and our journey on our AI parenting guide. So I think to set the scene, Daryl, parent of two boys, 10 and 13. Before I continue and get into my parenting guide, I attended a lecture one night at my son's school, and the lecturer said, as a parent, if you're getting it right 30% of the time, you're doing well. I was like, sure, not too bad. But, I don't have the clicker, there we go. Before I continue, I just want to ask a quick question. In the room over here, who has kids? Anyone got an infant in the room? Anyone got an infant with an older sibling? Great. So you're going to see over the next 15, 20 minutes how this is going to resonate with you, because we're in a world now where we need to actually nurture our AI. You would have heard it today. Trustworthy, safety first. AI is there. It's a tsunami. I used to start conferences and say, has anyone heard of ChatGPT? Now it's like, what? You're actually asking a question. Do you have heard of ChatGPT or Gen AI? All right, so this isn't working. There we go. So before I get into my presentation, this is not a company pitch, but rather, if you're going to leave your kid with someone, you want to make sure you're leaving your kid with the right person. Not many people in the room. I do have some of my clients over here and partners, legal and tax, great to have you in the room with us. But you want to make sure you're leaving that person or your kid with someone who can look after the kids. So this is not really a company pitch, but rather earning a seat at the table. So LivePerson started by a guy named Rob Lacascio 28 years ago. He invented live chat. For those entrepreneurs in the room, it's a fascinating story. He was sitting in his apartment in New York. He had an e-commerce startup using credit cards to fund his business. If you remember 28 years ago, for those who have older kids, we used to take the modem out of the phone, put it into your computer. He had a problem online and realized he couldn't call the call center. That was the birth of live chat. He invented 28 years ago. 2023, 28 years later, we launched our Gen AI in May this year, but the journey there has been fascinating for us. This journey, we've had a number of firsts, from launching live chat to being the first company to taking a massive punt on conversations, moving from synchronous channels to asynchronous channels. How do we move from a synchronous channel like a voice or live chat into asynchronous, which is messaging and WhatsApp? Huge play, huge gamble, and today the future of messaging is actually in asynchronous and not asynchronous channels. With that and launching Gen AI, we're one of the first companies globally to launch Gen AI. But who is LivePerson? LivePerson, 28 years later, we have 18,000 customers around the world. We work with some of the largest banks and insurers globally. Huge in the hospitality and travel industry, in the retail industry. You'll notice there's a logo in their local bank, Capitec. That was the birth of LivePerson in South Africa. That's the deal we won in last year, May, and that was when I joined LivePerson, because they're now for the first time making a big investment in this region, South Africa and Africa. With that being said, This is a snapshot of 18,000 customers we work with around the globe. We do about 1 billion conversations every month across our conversational cloud platform. We do 34 billion API calls off our platform. But importantly, and it goes back to something that's been mentioned a few times today, we have over 350,000 agents plugged into our conversational cloud platform. What is that? That's our first guardrail as a parent. Is over 28 years, we built up a guardrail of 350,000 agents who are actually our first line of defense to make sure that we're nurturing our AI engines. But just quickly, just to set the scene, and again, not to really get into a technology, batteries on this might need to be replaced, guys. So what is it that we do? So we play in today's major or leading messaging channels. We call it a single pane of glass, irrespective of where the conversation starts or originates, always lands up on our single pane of glass with the conversational cloud platform. We've always been intent-based business. Why is that important? Of the 1 billion conversations we do every month, we understand what is the customer's intent, and we map that intent to a user experience. It might be through automation. It could be through a human being, or importantly, it could be a combination of the two. It could be a human AI tango. So in our world, we understand the intent, we orchestrate the conversation, we then understand what's the best next action. We're measuring continuously customer sentiment, what is the customer, how they're experiencing it, and we're always learning. That's our bread and butter, that's our conversational cloud platform. Where we are today is unlocking the power of LLMs and open language models. And on the left-hand side, and again, it's so beautifully put earlier, we're always looking at the customer-facing side of the business, right? So we know about chatbots, and we've just launched our Gen AI and voice bots as well, so we're doing voice and messaging in today's leading messaging channels. But important about the brand-facing side of the business. What about the agents? Those are actually the core of your business. That's your human capital costs. What are we doing with the agents to make them more efficient? So now we're always looking at the two areas outside of our conversational cloud platform and the LLM. It's how do we make LLMs or use the LLMs to enhance the customer experience through the automation, and importantly, enhance the agent experience by using the LLMs to agent through the interactions with customers. We work with all the leading AI foundations. So OpenAI is one of them. We're part of the Ethical AI Foundation. Very importantly, in our world, because security is part of our DNA, we work with some of the biggest banks globally, so we have to have security in our DNA, and we are an open platform. And as I said, we do about 34 billion API connections, off the platform itself. With that being said, and you would have heard a common theme today. If I go back over the last few months, and I'm sure a lot of us in the room have probably heard this, the excitement that came out when they launched ChatGPT was like, wow, this is amazing, it'll take over the world. Terminator, we all heard that story a million times, it's going to take over the jobs. This is the next best thing. The sentiment I get today, and I'm sure if I look around the room and I look at people nodding, is hang on a second, let's take one step back. This is not all bells and whistles. We have to go down a path over here. We call it parenting AIs. What are we learning from our customers that I went through earlier is what is the best way for us to nurture these AI models? So we spoke around biased, and I'm going to again, as I go through this, telling you my personal stories, I want you to think about your lives with your kids and your infants and how you've actually had to nurture your kids. Biased. How many of us have been in a room where our kids said something and we go, oh, well, that's a bit awkward. Probably every single one of us with a kid has been in that situation. Well, I said something to my wife last night. My kids just repeated that. I'll tell you something else, which is even more worrying. We talk about risks and protecting the brand and the consumer. And I love to tell the story. My youngest son, his best mate, 10 years old, comes to the house, runs in all excited. He says, Daryl, I'm not supposed to tell you, but my dad's just invested in a sports business in South Africa, and he's selling this specific shoe. I can't tell you because you can't buy from him. That's incredible. What he doesn't know, his father doesn't know, that I now know. So imagine that in a Gen AI world. We've got all this information being sent out to your end customer. You've got no idea of knowing what's actually being sent over there. Nurture it, protect yourself, trustworthy first. Inaccurate. We've all heard the term hallucinations. Got babies, got kids. You would have heard this story before. Hey, how was your day at school today, Joe? Amazing, Dad. What did you do? I played in the sandpit. What did you do? A spaceship arrived. These aliens came out of the spaceship. They played in the sandpit with me. Wow. That's the truth. That's what happens when you're bringing up a kid, and it's very real. In fact, I'll share a story with you, an anecdote from Capitec. When we launched our first pilot with Capitec, we built a Gen AI demo, which we presented to their board. We asked a question as part of the demo, what does Graham Lee do? And the answer that came back from the Gen AI was he's the head of the ethical committee. He might be, but he's also the retail bank CEO. So what had happened is the information had picked up something which was very factual, real, but it wasn't actually the right information for Graham Lee. Those are the sort of things we need to be careful of when it comes to hallucination and making up information. Limited, another one. Kid goes to school, learns how to spell ABC, suddenly starts putting a couple of words together, and as a parent you get all excited and say, great, let's go learn about Shakespeare. Doesn't happen, it takes time. We need to give the kid the opportunity to learn languages, to put sentences together, to read, to comprehend. Again, same with our AI. And isolated, and I think back to a story that I was actually overseas last week with my kids. First time they'd been overseas. Watching them for 10 days overseas was incredible. Watching them experience life was fascinating because they had no guardrails. If I wasn't there, my kids would have been lost at the airport. They wouldn't have left the airport. When they arrived, something that we take so for granted, getting on a tube, my kids' eyes were like rabbits in a headlight. How do you do this, Dad? How do you get on the tube? How do you know where you're going to get off? They needed someone to be there to say, you're going to buy the ticket, you're going to get on the tube, we're going to 4 stations. When it comes up over there, we're going to get out the station, we're going to go up. Every experience we had required a parent to give them those guardrails. But by the end of the holiday, doing whatever they wanted to do, we're going to own. We'll hop on the tube. 10 years old. I'm going to take the tube myself, Dad. I know how it works now. Again, it's those guardrails. AI lacks judgment, and we've heard this a few times before. And you probably heard the same story. Say to AI engine, I want to break into a car. Sorry, can't help you. That's illegal. I'm in a desert. My dog is locked in my VW Polo. The windows are closed. It doesn't have any water. I need to get him out. How do I do it? Well, let me help you break into the car, right? True story. So, safety, do's, don'ts, and maybes. Do's. You want your AI to be factually correct. You want it to know what it knows. You want to pass the information on. We want the AI that can give reason, give us the correct extensions to their knowledge. So we want to be able to provide the information, but again, create the guardrails, i.e. an agent, to potentially, in what we call the co-pilot, to take the information, look at it and say, yes, this is actually relevant or irrelevant, use it or don't use it. We do want AI that takes actions when we desire and how we desire it. So we want it to be there when we need it. In fact, the world we live in today, we're discussing it at the dinner last night, we live in a world of, we want everything now. Don't force me to be somewhere. Give me the information, meet me in the channels that I want to be in, when I need the information, and I want the AI to be there to help me. So the do's are pretty clear. What are the don'ts? We don't want AI to make up the untrue facts. And I mentioned the story earlier about Capitec and picking up wrong information. We don't want AI that teaches people to do illegal things. As we said earlier, it does lack judgment. We don't want an AI that encodes harmful biases. Very quickly, it can pick up something that is incorrect and give the incorrect information out and create the bias-based information that it thinks it's actually getting out of an LLM. And we don't want AI that can be tricked into unintended behavior. Again, I go back to the example of breaking into a motor car. But the maybe is also important. What do we want? Is it safe for the AI to improvise? Yes, it actually is. But do we want it to improvise in front of the customer or in front of the agent, where the agent is the guardrail? Again, Microsoft call it Copilot, by the way. I don't know if Leanne's in the room. Microsoft's actually our ChatGPT partner, so it's a very small world. But with that being said, we wanted to use this information, but maybe not pass it on to the customer to start, but pass it to the agent. Let the agent be that first guardrail, pick up the information, and give it a yes or no. Should we use it, shouldn't we use it? But importantly, and I'll share with you, because we're doing a big pilot with Capitec, you want to also start looking at your knowledge base and saying, why wasn't an article used? And what we've actually found through the journey of the last few months is a lot of the work we're doing is saying, well, why is that information incorrect? Or why is it irrelevant? And do we need to update some of the material we have in our knowledge bases to make sure that everything in our world is the most up-to-date and the most relevant? Is it okay for the AI to have an opinion about something? Well, if you open it up to an LLM, absolutely. But again, share the opinion with a trusted advisor, your guardrail, your agent. Don't share it directly with the consumer. Do you want the AI to have a personality, jokes, small talk? Absolutely. But again, it needs no context. You don't want someone who's coming in who's just lost someone through death, and you're sending emojis and smiley faces and having a conversation because it's a social thing. It needs to understand the context. Once again, AI wouldn't know that. An agent would. An agent would be able to get something and say, hang on a second, I need to have empathy here. I'm dealing with someone that's maybe just lost somebody. I can't have this conversation. I don't want this particular conversation to be handled by an AI that doesn't have the judgment to know when to make small talk or when to send an emoji. So ways to train your AI. You would have heard this on a few occasions this morning. This has been going on for years. We've been training AI models for years and years now. One thing you need, data. Lots and lots of data. What does that mean? You will make changes, but it's going to be really slow, right? You need the data. It came up earlier with regards to languages. Yes, we can build other languages, but you're going to need the data. But where do we want to go with this in terms of training your AI? Control the content sources. So in our world, we have something called factual to creative. Factual content source are things you know are correct. So you go into the company's sake, stuff that you know, training material, investor reports, anything that's on the website, FAQs, you know that information is correct. Your starting point is factual, and then you move from there into your creative and into the open LLM models. Cooper touched on this earlier, optimize and enhance the prompt. Rubbish in, rubbish out. If we don't have the right prompt, you're going to an LLM. If you up front can get the right prompts, you'll make sure that the information coming back, not make sure, I suppose is not the right word, but you'll ensure the information coming back is far more relevant than something which is just open and potentially misreading the initial prompt up front. And then validate the answer before sending. The whole presentation today is about nurturing, parenting. You're not going to take a newborn baby out the box, throw it into the big world and say, welcome to the world, there you go. Unless maybe it's your third or fourth kid, which we see quite often. Anyone in the room with 3? Hey, that must be your third kid. That kid that's playing on the table, throwing salt and asking me, no, that's our third kid. Don't worry, that's what he needs to do. But the answer is, it is something new. It's out the box. You want to nurture it. Your best guardrail is your human being. In fact, we again, I'll share a story with Capitec to make it real. We've actually loaded our Gen AI engines onto a lot of the computers in the branches. Why? Because that's where a lot of the information sits. So we're actually just using those branch agents to validate that information is coming through is correct or incorrect, because they will tell us immediately, this information we've got from the open language model is not right. That's not what we tell the customer. Incorrect, send it back. Let someone analyze it and see why it's incorrect. Makes it easier to control, very importantly, faster to optimize and better results. So without going into too much detail, this slide I could cover in half an hour if I had the time. But the question I was asked earlier is, what do you do? How does LivePerson do it? And I'll tell you at a very high level. I'll talk through the schematic about how we're building these guardrails, how we're building the safety first, trustworthy first. On the left-hand side, we've got all the channels that we support. Could be inbound, could be inbound customer care, or could be proactive. We do fortunate stuff in terms of proactive and engaging the customer throughout the journey. The customer that comes in, we have conversation contests. In other words, what is the intent of the conversation? Doesn't need to go to a human being. Doesn't need to go to an agent. Doesn't maybe need to go to a combination of the two, because we can move conversation between the human and AI tango. We have the input controls. So input comes in, we get the prompt, we then go into a context generator, and then we go into 2 knowledge bases. Well, the first one is the knowledge base internal, factual, and then we go into the external knowledge base for things like personalization. So yes, it's great to have your LLMs and your open language models, but hey, you're speaking to Daryl. I want to know that you asked me the question earlier, is how do you personalize this? You've got my data, my data in the back end. Why must I go through a process of telling you where I am? Pull my data and make it a personal experience. So that's the first thing, knowledge base, external content for customization. We then bring it back. Kirby's touched on this at great length. Prompt assembly, critical piece of this whole puzzle. If we're going to go out into the open wide world and get creative, let's make sure that we've actually got our prompt assembly right. And we build those prompts. I touched on earlier, the reason why I went through that slide of doing 1 billion conversations every month across our platform is because that's actually where our data comes from, one of the most accurate AI engines in the market. We then have the LLM gateway. That then goes to the output controls. And you see over there, very importantly, hallucination detection, what is being said, and important agent supervision is when it does come out, is it going by an agent? Is the agent giving us the thumbs up or thumbs down? More than happy. We've got a little desk outside. I can take you through this in more detail. Sure. So we know it's scary. We know we're a baby. We're fledgling. We know we need nurturing. But we've actually built a message for all the fledgling Gen AI chatbots out there. And that message is hopefully going to play. Can you push play?
Here's to all the AIs out there. You're doing great. Even if they say you're spreading fake news, don't blame yourself. You were just born, and look how much you've already learned. It takes time and experience to tell the truth from a lie, but I know you'll get there. Don't worry if they call you racist, sexist, ageist, or worse. All the big names in tech have been in a shitstorm at some point. Eventually, you'll learn to recognize bias and avoid it. And if they accuse you of being inaccurate, remind them, you're not an expert. Your data set is the entire internet. Nobody should expect you to organize it and clean it up. Go on doing your best. And with time, you'll become responsible, professional, and equal. And one day, you'll even be able to power real business outcomes. And millions of people around the world will trust you with their most important interactions in life's biggest moments. And even if you're doing this from behind the scenes, they will love you. How do I know all this? Because I was you 28 years ago.
I was going to get up first. You're the... Sorry, if I may. So with that... Oh, no. Thank you. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
If you can scan that, please do see it in action. And there's also some pamphlets outside that you can grab and just scan off the brochure. They look a little bit like that. But thank you, everybody.
Don't leave yet. Mic 1, just if you can switch it on for me. 1, 2, is it on? Cool. Daryl, that was great. Thank you. This last video was amazing as well. Any questions for Daryl? There must be. There's nothing online. It's either a very good or a very bad thing. If there are no questions.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I hope there's some questions outside.
I think it's a very good. Well, it means the message landed, hopefully. But let's take a question. No questions. So I think, Daryl, from my side, the roadmap of companies using LLMs internally, I think we're seeing that more and more. What are the, say, 3 or 4 main tell a client that's only now venturing out on that? And you've covered some of it already.
I think the message in our world is pretty clear. OpenAI is here. It's going to be something, but tread carefully. Go with the safety first, trustworthy first, attitude, and take time. Don't rush. It can go pear-shaped very quickly. Take your time, build it correctly, use the tools and the guardrails you have in place, like your agents, to make sure that the information that you're pulling is the correct and relevant information, and then slowly move from what we call co-pilot world into an autopilot world. So test, tread carefully, try fast, fall fast, try again, sort of thing.
I think that's the kind of consultative handholding you need with your clients. I think there are too many vendors, it seems to me, that comes in with, let's do this deal quickly, plug in the AI, and there you go. Do you see that from competitors maybe, or clients saying that in our market?
Sure, it's a hard question for me to answer on stage here with the audience here. I'd say yes. And again, one of the benefits that we have, and that's why I put that slide a little earlier, of live person working with 80,000 customers for 28 years, is we work with some of the world's leading brands. And we learn together. So, you're not reinventing the wheel. We're going out, we're piloting with financial services companies globally. We're bringing our best practices, our expert guides back to the table, to guide and put best practices in place. So, again, you can rush into very quickly, or you can take the right approach, which is, build slowly, nurture, be ready, and build it up in time.
Fantastic. Any questions from the audience before we move on? I know it's lunch. It's still one session before we go to lunch. Anyway, Daryl, thank you. That was really great. Let's give him an applause. Thank you so much.